Namaste. So on Christmas, I introduced this idea. I didn't really introduce it, but other people have, that the question people ask about God has changed since, say, the 50s, 60s, and 70s. When something bad would happen and people would say, why did God let that happen? And it's changed from that to today, when we tend to ask, where was God when that happened? And at first it seems like it's not much of a shift. But there's a pretty significant shift there, because it's almost as if the first question was answered. Why would God allow that to happen? And we said, well, if it was particularly bad, we don't think that God sent it or allowed it, and so it must be the wrong question. And somehow we decided that for something really bad to happen, God must now be absent. And so in that place, so we started asking, where was God when this happened? And this morning on my news feed, I saw that there was more deaths reported from a series of tornadoes in Texas. And they've had pretty severe storms down there. And I thought this is a perfect place for that question. Where was God when these tornadoes came? And I think our problem is that we only want to locate God in one place. So God then is either here or God's here, but God's certainly not in between and can't be in both places at the same time. So last night I was out in thriving metropolis of West Dallas. And I was actually driving a little bit, and I had gone to pick somebody up from an apartment complex on about 135th and National. And the address I had was wrong, so I couldn't get the person. And I thought, well, I'd go get a cup of coffee. And I headed to that Starbucks that's on Highway 100 between National and Oklahoma. And I had noticed, but not really thought about it, as I was driving west on National to try and pick that person up, a New Berlin police car with lights and sirens coming toward me. And I probably messed around inside there looking for this person for 3 or 4 minutes before I gave up and said, this address doesn't exist. And then it would take a couple minutes to get to the Starbucks, and I decided I would go in to see, because I hadn't taken a travel mug with me, and the Christmas ones might be on sale for 50% off. So as I went in, or as I came out, back out, notice when I went in, there's a CC's Pizza in this same little strip mall, and a bunch, at least 40 kids, seeming to be middle school or high school age, I'm not really good at judging that anymore, yelling, shouting, inappropriate things. And then I went and got my coffee and I came out and I noticed that they were gone, but across the street where there's a BW3s, there were probably 6 or 7 squad cars. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. And I got in my car, because I'm pretty oblivious, drove down to Oklahoma to get on the freeway, and now there's like 10 or 12 squad cars in front of this roller rink that's just west of Highway 100 in Oklahoma. Now, can I say, the biblical question, can anything good come from Nazareth, that was asked of Jesus? What I want to know is, can anything good come from a roller rink? Post, like, 1960. Because we had a foster daughter once, God love her, dropped her off at there's a roller rink, or there used to be about 124th, almost at Silver Spring. And her white self walks into this roller rink and looks at some black people and says, in all seriousness, "What's up, my nigga?" And you know it didn't go well. Can you imagine? So again, can anything good come from a roller rink? Well, apparently, there's a capacity limit, of course, on the roller rink. And there were about 100 more kids than they could let in. And so they had to wait in line for people to leave, and it wasn't the best night to be standing outside yesterday. And apparently then they got kind of agitated and rowdy and started spreading out. And this is where they had, I can't remember where everybody came from, but they had West Dallas Police, of course, but I knew there were more cars there than West Dallas had in their police department. There was New Berlin, Greenfield, Milwaukee County Sheriffs, State Fair Police. I don't know if they came on the horses or not. I didn't see any horses galloping down National Avenue and trying to control this crowd. And so I went and I tried to make money for a couple hours, and as I came back, I was driving past that same intersection, and there were still people running across the street, or this might have been the second wave starting up. And this time transit police also went to help at this thing. This time there were 2 buses, and I don't know if these kids had gotten on the bus and started trouble, but and you could ask, where was God? But I think to get at it, you have to get to what we did earlier in the day, which was, for some reason, it's not quite clear to me. We went to the outlet mall down in Pleasant Prairie on the state line, right off the freeway. And there were actually people standing in line to get into North Face, I think. But there were other stores, like we went into the Coach store because I needed a new bag. And you could tell there wasn't a line when we went in. There had been, because those movie theater kind of, divide them up things were out. And I noticed that several of the stores had those. And, it was a miserable day, and I felt kind of bad for the employee that had to stand outside and play. Whoever thought a retail store would need like a bouncer? It's like the bars downtown, only you. And so we would say that somehow the one situation, or the 3 or 4 situations in West Dallas were substantially different from the situation in Pleasant Prairie. But I would say not. You have people waiting in line, and they either cope with it or they don't. And where is God? Is God fond of lines and bouncers and counters and capacity limits? That's a pretty nitpicky, small God. It says God is all about authority. Authority and order and things that aren't orderly and don't obey authority can't have anything to do with God, but here's Jesus in the temple. Who, by the way, I'm pretty sure didn't respond at 12 years old just like this. I'm sure he kind of, if this story was today, Jesus would have gone, rolled his eyes and said, oh my God, Mom and Dad. Or, oh my me, Mom and Dad. You're so stupid. Don't you know it was necessary for me to be in my Father's house, right? So, which side of that is right? If you're into, historical Jesus and Bible study and that sort of thing, you have this interesting question that the same Mary that was told by the archangel that she was pregnant and the child would become the Savior, the same story we read 2 days ago. She's forgotten by the time he's 12. And by the time he's an adult, she's trying to lock him up for crazy. So you have to wrestle with that, which isn't as hard as it seems. But if the real question is, where is God? And I included that Samuel reading because that Samuel reading kind of bookends the Jesus reading. Samuel's mother actually, let me put it this way, a prayer was put on the lips of Samuel's mother that, a very similar version of it was put on Mary's lips, and it became the Magnificat. So Samuel was seen as a kind of model of somebody given and dedicated to God. But then Jesus seems to be disobeying his earthly parents to obey his heavenly parents, and it all gets confused and muddled. And so, what if God is both with these kids who don't know how to handle their frustration, and with, pardon me, the owners of the roller rink, CC's Pizza, BW3, and just about every law enforcement agency in the area. Can God be on both sides? Can God be on every side? What if a tornado goes through Texas and people get killed, and it's real easy to say that God's on the side of the victims and the first responders and yada, 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 all those people. But can we see that God is also on the side of the tornado, because a tornado is something that, while it has tragic consequences, is necessary to maintain the atmosphere of our planet. And so if God is anti-tornado, God is kind of anti-atmosphere, which would have dire consequences for just about everybody. What if God isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card in a Monopoly game? What if God isn't, a talisman? Talisman and amulets and things like that were worn by ancient people to safeguard them. A rabbit's foot is a kind of talisman. And we say, oh, we're much more sophisticated than that. But how many of us wear jewelry that has spiritual or religious significance? How many of us have certain things we do because on some level they bring us comfort, and that comfort safeguards us? And so we're really all looking for that, but what we tend to do, and it's very normal, is say, well, it's easy to tell whose side God is on. God is on my side. And it gets harder to consider that God might be also on the side of the thing that causes me some inconvenience, or even some pain, or even some injury, or even some setback. Because we jump to this conclusion that says, if God isn't on my side and my side alone, I'm somehow inadequate, insufficient, less than normal, wrong, broken. And of course, none of us, if any of those things are true of us, have the market cornered on it. I mean, everybody makes mistakes. I remember my middle school assistant principal, the one that was, there was always the good cop, bad cop assistant principals when I was in school. The one guy that was the disciplinarian, and the other guy that was supposed to make it better, And the disciplinarian made some remark at an assembly about the only perfect person to walk the earth had done that 2,000 years ago, and he knew it wasn't himself. Mr. Busalaki was aware. No, that wasn't his name. Some Italian name. Busalaki was the algebra guy. He was aware that he was not perfect. And I didn't know who in the world he was talking about at that time in my life, from 2,000 years ago. And I'm not sure he was even necessarily right about that, but that's maybe for another day. Because do we need to be perfect? Is God on our side only when we're right, or is God on our side when we try to and be aware of the times when we're not, and leading us towards having the courage to say, hey, I didn't handle that very well? Is God on the side of the white people of West Dallas, and that may be redundant, who will now say that when certain kinds of kids come out to our neighborhood, there's problems and we need to stop them from coming out? Or, for that matter, is God on the side completely of kids who decide to come out and make trouble and then don't have the good sense to back down and end up getting arrested on the night after Christmas, when I'm sure their parents were thrilled about having to go get them? I think the truth is that God is everywhere, in the good and the bad, the hot and the cold, the on and the off, the left and the right, the up and the down, the yin and the yang. And we'll start to see where God is. We'll start to answer that question. Where is God? Where is God? Where is God? When we start to be able to see, and to do that we have to consider the possibility that God's everywhere. I'm reading a book, I'll close with this. Now I'm getting Pentecostal. I'll close with this. Pentecostal preachers close 3 times. The third time they say they're going to, they actually do. But there's a woman named Jessica Stern who wrote a book called, she's written a lot of books actually, but I think it's called Terror. She goes to the Middle East and interviews terrorists by herself, so she's kind of crazy and has a adrenaline thing or something. Well, maybe, because then she wrote a book now that I'm reading now called Denial, which is about the fact that in the early 70s she was the victim, with a lot of other people, of a serial rapist that was operated in Massachusetts. And by the time the police later reopened the case, and they discovered who the person was who had done this, but he was already dead. He had hung himself. And what she's moving toward in this book is starting to see that all the people that mishandled everything about this, for all the many victims, none of them were really ill-intended. They were all doing the best they could. And the bizarre thing is, and what struck me, given this Where is God talk, or topic for the last, today and Christmas, is what the people said about the perpetrator, that he was such a nice guy. Now, maybe they're mistaken, you know, and every time that happens, you know, they interview, if somebody kills somebody, they go find the neighbors. You know, how was this guy? Oh, he was a nice guy, he was a quiet guy. And it's like we're waiting for them to say, well, he had 2 horns and 3 heads. You know, and it was clear to me that something was going to go wrong. And so maybe even the people that we have the hardest time understanding, much less forgiving, maybe God's in them too, perhaps struggling to be seen or heard. And maybe that's more than we can handle right now. But if we start by trying to see that God is in these kids raising hell in West Dallas on a Saturday night, we'll eventually get to that place. And then maybe we won't be so angry. And then maybe we won't have to throw quite so many people into prison. And then maybe we'll be able to do away with the death penalty in the states that still have it. And then maybe we'll start to look at prison as an opportunity to rehabilitate instead of just warehouse. And then maybe everything could change. But it all starts with a bunch of kids coming out of Cece's Pizza and getting between me and the promised land.